The moment Jennifer walked into my home office with those divorce papers, I knew my life was about to change forever. What she didn't expect was my response. What she couldn't have predicted was that her demand for everything, the house, the kids, half my assets, would be met with a simple signature and a smile. You see, sometimes when someone shows you exactly who they are, the kindest thing you can do is believe them the first time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But Jennifer's panic when I handed back those signed papers, that was just the beginning of a story that would reshape everything I thought I knew about love, family, and what it truly means to fight for what matters most. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment when Jennifer Miller stopped being the woman I married and became someone I barely recognized. It was a Tuesday evening in November when I came home from the law firm to find her standing in our kitchen, staring out the window at our backyard, where Emma and Lucas were playing on the swing set I'd built them last summer. "David," she said without turning around, her voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before, "we need to talk." Those 4 words should have been my first warning. In 12 years of marriage, Jennifer had never been one for serious conversations. She was the type of person who dealt with problems by shopping, by calling her sister, Carol, to complain, or by simply pretending they didn't exist until they resolved themselves. Direct confrontation wasn't her style. I set my briefcase down by the kitchen island and loosened my tie. It had been a long day at the firm, dealing with a particularly difficult merger case, and all I wanted was to grab a beer, help the kids with their homework, and maybe catch the end of the Lakers game. Normal Tuesday evening stuff. "Sure, honey. What's on your mind?" I asked, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a cold bottle. That's when she turned around, and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. It wasn't anger or sadness or even frustration. It was calculation. Cold, methodical calculation, like she was working through a business transaction in her head. "I'm not happy, David. I haven't been happy for a long time." I paused with the beer halfway to my lips. "What do you mean? Did something happen today? Is this about your promotion at the marketing firm? Because I told you, if Richardson isn't recognizing your worth, maybe it's time to. It's not about work." She cut me off with a sharpness that made me actually step back. "It's about us. About this marriage. About the life we've built that feels more like a prison than a partnership." The words hit me like a physical blow. Prison? We lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Cedar Park, one of Austin's most desirable neighborhoods. Our kids went to private school. We took family vacations to Colorado every summer and Hawaii every other Christmas. Jennifer drove a brand new BMW, had a weekly spa appointment, and never had to worry about money for anything she wanted. "Jennifer, I don't understand. Where is this coming from? Last week you were talking about redoing the master bathroom. You seemed excited about the marble countertops you found online." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Marble countertops, David? Really? You think marble countertops are what make a marriage work?" I set the beer down on the counter, my full attention now focused on my wife. In all our years together, through the stress of law school, through the early years of building my practice when money was tight, through the sleepless nights with newborns and the chaos of raising 2 small children, we'd never had a conversation like this. Sure, we'd had arguments, every couple does, but this felt different. This felt final. "Help me understand," I said carefully. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've been living someone else's life for 12 years. I'm saying that I wake up every morning in a house that feels like a museum, married to a man who treats me like a business partner instead of a wife, raising children who barely know who I am underneath the role of mommy." The accusation stung because there was just enough truth in it to make me question everything. It was true that I worked long hours. Building a successful law practice in Austin's competitive market hadn't been easy. And yes, there were weeks when I left early and came home late, when my mind was occupied with cases and clients and court dates. But I'd always thought Jennifer understood. I'd always believed we were working toward the same goals. "You never said anything," I managed. "If you were feeling this way, why didn't you talk to me sooner? We could have worked on it. We could have gone to counseling, taken a vacation, figured it out together." Because I didn't want to figure it out together anymore, David. I wanted to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by being Mrs. David Miller. That was the moment I should have seen what was coming. That was the moment I should have recognized. The careful phrasing, the way she'd already shifted into past tense when talking about our marriage. But I was still operating under the assumption that this was a problem to be solved, not a decision that had already been made. Okay, I said, slowly. What do you need? Do you want to take some time for yourself? Maybe visit your sister in Denver for a week or two? I can handle the kids, and when you come back, we can start fresh. Maybe plan that trip to Europe we've been talking about. She shook her head, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been pity in her expression. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about needing a vacation or some time away. This is about needing a completely different life. Through the kitchen window, I could hear Emma and Lucas laughing as they took turns pushing each other on the swings. 8-year-old Emma was probably trying to teach 5-year-old Lucas some new trick she'd learned at school, and he was probably giggling with that infectious laugh that never failed to make me smile. The sound of their happiness felt surreal, against the backdrop of what was happening in our kitchen. What exactly are you asking for, Jennifer? I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us like a physical presence. I found myself staring at her, waiting for the punchline or the explanation that would make this make sense. When neither came, I felt something cold settle in my chest. You want a divorce, I repeated, more to myself than to her. I've already spoken with a lawyer. I know what I'm entitled to under Texas law. I want primary custody of Emma and Lucas, the house, my car, and half of all our assets, including your share of the law firm. The clinical way she laid out her demands was what finally broke through my shock. This wasn't an emotional outburst or a cry for help. This was a negotiation that had been planned and prepared for. The woman standing in front of me had done her homework. How long have you been planning this? Does it matter? It matters to me. It matters to our children. It matters to the 12 years we've spent building a life together. For the first time since the conversation started, Jennifer's composure cracked slightly. Those 12 years built your life, David. Your career, your success, your perfect suburban family where you get to be the hero provider while I disappear into the background. Well, I'm done disappearing. I wanted to argue with her, to point out all the ways she was wrong, all the sacrifices I'd made for our family, all the times I'd prioritized her dreams alongside my own. But something in her tone told me that ship had already sailed. Whatever had led her to this decision, whatever resentments had been building while I was focused on work and providing for our family, they were beyond the reach of late-night conversations and couples therapy. And the kids? I asked. Have you thought about how this is going to affect Emma and Lucas? Of course I've thought about the kids. They'll adjust, children are resilient, and they'll still see you on weekends and holidays. Weekends and holidays. The casual way she reduced my relationship with my children to a custody schedule hit me harder than anything else she'd said. Emma, who still crawled into bed with me on Saturday mornings to tell me about her dreams. Lucas, who insisted I read him 3 stories every night and check under his bed for monsters. I was supposed to become a weekend dad, a visitor in their lives instead of a daily presence. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Of course. My lawyer said you'd probably want to get your own representation. I'd recommend you do it quickly, though. I've already started looking at apartments, and I'd like to have Emma and Lucas settled somewhere new before Christmas. Before Christmas, 6 weeks away. She wanted to blow up our family and have everyone settled into new living arrangements before the holidays. The timeline felt as calculated as everything else about this conversation. That night, after Jennifer had gone upstairs to what I assumed was research more apartments online, I sat in my home office staring at case files I couldn't focus on. The house felt different somehow, like learning about Jennifer's plans had already started the process of dismantling everything we'd built together. Around 10 o'clock, Emma padded downstairs in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 2. Daddy? Why was Mommy crying earlier? I pulled her onto my lap, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. Sometimes grown-ups get upset about things, sweetheart. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with you or Lucas. Are you and Mommy fighting? Out of the mouths of babes. 8 years old, and she could already sense the shift in our household dynamics. We're working through some adult stuff, I said, which felt like the truth without being the whole truth. But no matter what happens, you know that Daddy loves you and Lucas more than anything in the whole world, right? She nodded against my chest. More than your work? The question was innocent, but it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Much more than my work, baby girl. Much, much more. After I tucked Emma back into bed and checked on Lucas, who was fast asleep with his arms wrapped around a toy dinosaur, I found myself standing in the hallway between their rooms, trying to imagine what weekends and holidays would feel like. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Trying to picture helping with homework via video calls and hearing about their school days secondhand. The next morning, Jennifer was different again. Not cold exactly, but distant in a way that suggested she'd already mentally moved out of our house and our marriage. She made breakfast for the kids with an efficiency that felt more like going through the motions than the comfortable routine we'd established over years of family mornings. I'm going to call Tom today, I told her, as she packed Emma's lunch. Tom had been my best friend since law school and was now one of Austin's most respected family attorneys. That's probably wise, she replied, without looking up from the sandwich she was making. The sooner we can get the paperwork sorted out, the easier this will be on everyone. Easier. As if there was an easy way to explain to Emma and Lucas that Mommy and Daddy weren't going to live in the same house anymore. As if there was an easy way to split a life into two separate existences. At work that day, I found myself going through the motions of my own professional routine, while my mind replayed every moment of the previous evening's conversation. My secretary, Mrs. Chen, commented that I seemed distracted during a client meeting, and she wasn't wrong. How do you focus on contract negotiations and legal briefs when your personal life is imploding? When I called Tom during my lunch break, his response was immediate and professional. How quickly can you get to my office? He asked after I gave him the basic details. Is it that urgent? David, in Texas, the parent who files first often has certain advantages, especially when it comes to temporary custody arrangements. If Jennifer has already consulted with an attorney and is talking about moving the kids to a new apartment, you need legal representation yesterday. An hour later, I was sitting in Tom's downtown office, looking out at the Austin skyline while he reviewed the situation from a legal perspective. The good news is that Texas favors joint custody arrangements when both parents are fit, he said, making notes on a yellow legal pad. The challenging news is that if she can establish primary residency with the children before any court orders are in place, it becomes harder to change later. What are my options? Well, the standard approach would be to contest the divorce, terms, fight for 50-50 custody, and negotiate a settlement that protects your assets and your relationship with Emma and Lucas. Based on what you've told me, we could probably achieve that, though it would mean months of legal proceedings and significant costs on both sides. And the non-standard approach? Tom leaned back in his chair, studying my face. The non-standard approach would be to give her exactly what she's asking for. I stared at him. I'm sorry. What? Hear me out. Sometimes when someone makes unreasonable demands, the most powerful response is to call their bluff. Jennifer wants the house, primary custody, and half your assets? Give it to her. All of it. Immediately. That sounds like the opposite of legal advice. It's psychological advice wrapped in legal strategy. Think about it, David. What is Jennifer really asking for? She wants to be free from the marriage, but she also wants the security and lifestyle that the marriage provided. She wants independence, but she wants you to fund that independence. She wants to start over, but she wants to take everything from your old life with her. I was starting to understand where Tom was going with this, but it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. You're suggesting I call her bluff by agreeing to her demands? I'm suggesting that sometimes the best way to show someone what they're really asking for is to give it to them completely. Jennifer has built a fantasy in her mind about what divorced life will look like. Single motherhood with 2 young children, managing a household entirely on her own, dealing with financial responsibilities she's never had to handle before, Let her experience that reality. And in the meantime, I lose daily access to my children. Temporarily. David, you're one of the most successful attorneys in Austin. You're financially stable, you have a flexible schedule, and you're already more involved in Emma and Lucas's daily care than a lot of fathers. If Jennifer struggles with the reality of single parenthood, if the kids start acting out because of the instability, if the financial pressure becomes overwhelming, the court will be much more receptive to modifying custody arrangements. It was a risky strategy, but there was logic to it. And if I was honest with myself, there was also a part of me that was curious to see what Jennifer would do when faced with the reality of everything she claimed to want. There's something else to consider, Tom continued. Jennifer's demands suggest she hasn't thought this through completely. She wants half your assets, but she also wants primary custody of 2 children who are used to a certain lifestyle. Private school tuition, extracurricular activities, healthcare costs, housing. In a good neighborhood, the math doesn't add up. Half your assets sounds like a lot of money until you're using it to fund 2 separate households. That evening, I came home to find Jennifer in the living room with her laptop, presumably apartment hunting. Emma was at the kitchen table working on homework, and Lucas was in the family room building something elaborate with his Legos. Jennifer, can we talk? She looked up from her screen with the same calculated expression I'd seen the night before. Of course. I called a lawyer today. I figured you would. What did he say? I sat down across from her, trying to read her expression. He said that fighting this would be expensive and time-consuming for both of us. He also said that you're entitled to ask for whatever you want, and I'm entitled to respond however I think is best. Okay, so what's your response? This was the moment. The moment where I either followed traditional divorce playbook and dug in for a long, expensive fight, or took the biggest gamble of my life. I agree to all of it. Jennifer blinked. I'm sorry, what? I agree. You can have the house, primary, custody of Emma and Lucas, your car, and half of everything else. I'll sign whatever papers you need me to sign. For the first time since this whole conversation started, Jennifer looked genuinely surprised. You're not going to fight me on any of it? Why would I fight you? You've clearly thought this through. You know what you want, and you're entitled to ask for it. If this is what will make you happy, then I want you to have it. I watched her face carefully as I spoke, looking for any sign of uncertainty or second thoughts. What I saw instead was confusion. This wasn't the reaction she'd been prepared for. Okay. That's good. That makes this easier. But something in her voice suggested it didn't feel easier. It felt unexpected. There are just a few things I'd like to ask for, I continued. I'd like to stay involved in Emma and Lucas's lives as much as possible. School events, doctor's appointments, important decisions about their education and health care. I want to be part of all of that. Of course, you're still their father. And I'd like us to try to maintain some consistency for them during the transition. Keep them in the same school, same extracurricular activities, same routines as much as possible. That was already my plan. Good. Then I think we're in agreement. Jennifer closed her laptop and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. David, can I ask you something? Sure. Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you trying to talk me out of this, or demanding mediation, or threatening to fight for custody? This isn't how these conversations usually go. I thought about how to answer that question honestly. Because, Jennifer, I love you enough to want you to be happy. And I love Emma and Lucas enough to want what's best for them, even if that means adjusting my own expectations about what our family looks like. It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that I was betting everything on Tom's psychological theory. I was gambling that Jennifer's fantasy about divorced life wouldn't survive contact with reality. I was hoping that giving her exactly what she asked for would help her understand what she was really giving up. That's very mature of you, she said, but her voice sounded smaller than it had the night before. I try to be. So what's our timeline? When do you want to make this official? I was thinking after the holidays. Give the kids time to adjust to the idea gradually. Interesting. 24 hours ago, she'd wanted everyone settled in new living arrangements before Christmas. Now she was talking about gradual adjustments and waiting until after the holidays. Whatever you think is best, I said. This is your decision, so you should set the pace. That night, after the kids were in bed, I heard Jennifer on the phone with her sister Carol. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but sound carries in our house, and Jennifer's voice was more strained than usual. No, Carol. He didn't fight me on anything. He just agreed to all of it. There was a pause while Carol responded. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. It's almost like he doesn't care whether I stay or go. Another pause. Of course I still want the divorce. This isn't about him agreeing or disagreeing. This is about me needing to find out who I am outside of this marriage. But even through the wall, I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. Whatever conversation she'd expected us to have, whatever reaction she'd been prepared for, my immediate agreement had thrown her off balance. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Jennifer continued looking at apartments online, but with less urgency than before. She mentioned the divorce to Emma and Lucas in vague terms, explaining that sometimes mommies and daddies decide to live in different houses while still being a family. Both kids took the news with the adaptability that children often show, asking practical questions about where they'd sleep and whether they'd still go to the same school. What surprised me was how Jennifer handled their questions. Instead of the confident explanations I'd expected, she seemed uncertain, frequently looking to me for confirmation or support. When Lucas asked if he could take his dinosaur collection to the new apartment, Jennifer hesitated before saying they'd have to see how much space there was. When Emma asked if she'd still be able to have friends over for sleepovers, Jennifer promised to try to find a place with enough room, but couldn't guarantee anything. Meanwhile, I made a point of being more present than ever. I started coming home for lunch when my schedule allowed, helping with homework every evening, and taking on more of the bedtime routine responsibilities. If I was going to become a weekend father, I wanted to maximize every moment I had with Emma and Lucas before that transition happened. Jennifer noticed the change in my schedule, but instead of seeming relieved that I was stepping up during a difficult time, she seemed almost annoyed by it. You don't have to hover, David, she said one evening as I helped Lucas with a bath while she did dishes. I can handle the kids' routines. I know you can. I just want to spend time with them. Well, you'll have plenty of time with them. On weekends. There was something defensive in her tone that hadn't been there during our original conversation about the divorce. Almost as if she was trying to convince herself as much as me. By the end of the first week, Jennifer's apartment hunting had slowed considerably. When I asked how it was going, she mentioned that finding a place in a good school district that was big enough for her and 2 children was more challenging than she'd expected. Everything in Cedar Park is either too expensive or too small, she said, scrolling through rental listings on her laptop. And the places I can afford aren't in areas where I'd want Emma and Lucas walking to school. What about looking further out? I suggested. Maybe Round Rock or Pflugerville. That would mean changing schools. You said you wanted to maintain consistency for the kids. I said I wanted what was best for them. If you find a great place, with good schools, we can make it work. But instead of seeming relieved by my flexibility, Jennifer looked frustrated. It's not that simple, David. Changing schools means new teachers, new friends, new routines, and it would make it harder for you to be involved in their daily activities. She was right, and we both knew it. What she was discovering was that maintaining Emma and Lucas's current lifestyle while establishing an independent household was more complicated than writing up demands in a divorce petition. The second week brought new challenges. Jennifer's car needed unexpected repairs, a transmission issue that would cost nearly $3,000 to fix. Normally, this would have been the kind of expense we'd discuss and handle together. Now, it highlighted the reality of managing major financial decisions as a single parent. I don't know whether to fix it or just get a different car, she said, sitting at the kitchen table with repair estimates spread out in front of her. But I can't afford a car payment and rent and everything else the kids need. You don't have to figure it out alone, I offered. I can help with the repair costs. No. If we're getting divorced, I need to learn to handle these things myself. It was admirable in theory, but I could see the stress building in her posture, in the way she rubbed her temples when she thought no one was looking, in the shorter temper she had with Emma and Lucas when they asked for things that required spending money. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening when Emma mentioned that her best friend Madison was having a birthday party at one of those indoor trampoline places the following weekend. "Can I go, Mommy?" Madison's mom said she'll drive me there, but you have to pick me up. Jennifer looked up from the stack of bills she'd been sorting through. "How much does it cost?" "I don't know." Madison's mom said something about $25 for the party and then money for pizza and cake. I watched Jennifer calculate in her head. $25 for the party, plus gas to drive across town for pickup, plus probably a gift for Madison, plus the inevitable requests for drinks or snacks that would come up during the event. $50, maybe $60, for one child's birthday party. "We'll see," Jennifer said, which is what parents say when the answer is probably no, but they don't want to disappoint their child immediately. After Emma went upstairs to get ready for bed, Jennifer sat staring at the bills spread across the kitchen table. "You know she can go to the party," I said gently. "It's not a big expense." "It's not about this one party, David. It's about the fact that there's always something. Emma needs new shoes because she's growing out of everything. Lucas wants to sign up for soccer in the spring. The school is asking for donations to the library fund. It adds up." It does add up. That's why people usually make these decisions together, as a team. The words were out of my mouth before I realized how they might sound. Jennifer looked up sharply. "Are you saying I can't handle this on my own?" "I'm saying it's harder to handle on your own. Everything is harder on your own. That's not a judgment about your capabilities. It's just math. 2 incomes are more than 1 income. 2 parents managing logistics is easier than 1 parent managing logistics. I don't need you to explain basic math to me." "You're right. I'm sorry." But the conversation had clearly rattled her. That night, I heard her on the phone with Carol again, and this time her voice was definitely strained. "It's not that I can't do it. It's that everything takes twice as long and costs twice as much as I expected. Finding an apartment, managing money, dealing with repairs and maintenance and all the kids' stuff. I guess I didn't realize how much David handled that I never thought about." There was a long pause. "No, I'm not having second thoughts. I'm just adjusting my expectations." But when I saw her the next morning, Jennifer looked like she hadn't slept well. She was quieter than usual during breakfast, and when Lucas spilled orange juice all over his school clothes and needed to change, her reaction was more sharp than the situation warranted. "Lucas, you have to be more careful. I don't have time to do extra laundry today, and those were your good school pants." Lucas's face crumpled, and Emma looked between her mother and brother with the worried expression kids get when they sense adult stress they don't understand. "Hey, buddy," I said, scooping Lucas up. "Accidents happen. Let's get you changed into something else, and I'll throw the orange juice clothes in the washing machine before I leave for work." "I can handle my own laundry," Jennifer said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know you can. I'm just helping out." That evening, Jennifer made an announcement at dinner that surprised all of us. "I think we should wait a little longer before I move out," she said, addressing Emma and Lucas but clearly intending the message for me as well. "I want to make sure I find the perfect place for us, and that might take a little more time." "How much more time?" Emma asked. "Maybe after Christmas. Maybe even after the new year. I want to make sure the transition is as smooth as possible for everyone." It was a reasonable explanation, but I could see the relief in Jennifer's posture as she said it. The urgency that had driven her initial timeline was gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like uncertainty. After the kids went to bed, I found Jennifer in the living room, laptop closed, staring out the window at the yard where Emma and Lucas had been playing when this whole conversation started 2 weeks ago. "Second thoughts?" I asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Not second thoughts, just making sure I'm thinking everything through properly. That's wise. It's a big decision with a lot of moving parts." "David, can I ask you something honestly?" "Always. When I told you I wanted a divorce, you agreed so quickly. Were you relieved? Had you been thinking about it too?" The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't know the answer, but because of how vulnerable she sounded asking it. "No, Jennifer, I wasn't relieved, and I hadn't been thinking about it. I was shocked." "Then why did you agree so easily?" Why didn't you fight for us? And there it was, the real question that had been building for 2 weeks. Jennifer had asked for a divorce expecting resistance, expecting me to argue and negotiate and try to talk her out of it. My immediate agreement had left her without the conflict she'd apparently been prepared for. Because I realized something when you were laying out your demands, I said carefully. I realized that if you'd gotten to the point where you'd already spoken to a lawyer and decided exactly what you wanted from a divorce, then anything I said or did to try to change your mind would just be delaying the inevitable. So, you think this is inevitable? I think you get to decide whether it's inevitable or not. That's what I've been trying to show you. You want to know what life looks like without this marriage? You get to find out. You want to experience independence and discover who you are outside of being Mrs. David Miller? No one's stopping you. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. What if I discover that who I am outside this marriage isn't someone I like very much? Then you'll have learned something important about yourself, and you'll get to decide what to do with that information. And what if I discover that this marriage, this life we've built together, is actually what I want after all? Then you'll have learned something important about that too. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're being very philosophical about the possibility of our family falling apart. Jennifer, our family isn't falling apart. Emma and Lucas are healthy and happy and loved. You and I are both committed to being good parents to them, regardless of whether we're married to each other. The structure of our family might change, but the foundation is solid. Is it, though? Is the foundation really solid if I could blow it up with one conversation? That was the question I'd been hoping she'd eventually ask herself. The question that got to the heart of what Tom had been talking about when he suggested calling her bluff. I don't know, I said honestly. What do you think? For the first time in 2 weeks, Jennifer looked genuinely uncertain. The confident, calculated woman who had walked into my office with divorce papers was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to be questioning everything she thought she knew about what she wanted. I think, she said slowly, that I may have been asking the wrong questions. What kind of questions should you have been asking? Instead of asking whether I wanted to be married to you, maybe I should have been asking why I felt so lost inside our marriage. Instead of asking for a divorce, maybe I should have been asking for us to build something different together. It was a profound shift, and I could see the moment it happened. The moment Jennifer stopped seeing our marriage as something to escape from and started seeing it as something that might be worth rebuilding. Those are different conversations, I agreed. Harder conversations maybe, but different ones. David, what if I told you I wanted to try those conversations instead? I'd say that I've been hoping you'd want to try those conversations for the past 2 weeks. She smiled for the first time since this whole situation began, and it was the smile I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. Not the polite smile she wore for social events or the strained smile she'd been using with the kids lately, but the real one that reached her eyes. So you were calling my bluff this whole time? I was giving you exactly what you asked for so you could decide if it was really what you wanted. That was risky. What if I had decided it was exactly what I wanted? Then I would have supported that decision and figured out how to be the best co-parent I could be. But I was betting that what you really wanted wasn't a divorce. I was betting that what you really wanted was to feel valued and seen and appreciated in our marriage. You were betting our entire family on a psychological theory. I was betting our entire family on 12 years of knowing you, Jennifer, and on the belief that people don't usually blow up good things unless they're in pain about something that feels fixable. We talked until almost midnight that night. Not about divorce papers or custody arrangements or asset division, but about the small frustrations and unspoken resentments that had built up over 12 years of marriage. About my work schedule and her feeling invisible. About her social needs and my tendency to prioritize practical concerns. About parenting decisions and household responsibilities and all the tiny negotiations that make up a shared life. It wasn't a magical conversation that solved everything instantly, but it was a beginning. A starting point for rebuilding something that had gotten lost somewhere between building careers and raising children and managing the logistics of adult life. 3 weeks later, Jennifer officially withdrew her divorce petition. 6 months after that, we renewed our vows in a small, ceremony in our backyard, with Emma and Lucas serving as ring bearers, and the swing set I'd built them visible in the background. But that's getting ahead of the story. The real transformation happened in those first 2 weeks, when Jennifer discovered that getting everything you think you want doesn't always feel the way you thought it would feel. And when I learned that, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let someone figure out what they really want, even if that process is terrifying for everyone involved. The divorce papers are still in my desk drawer, unsigned but not thrown away, a reminder that good marriages aren't immune to bad moments, and that sometimes the best way to save something precious is to be willing to let it go. The first major crack in Jennifer's resolve came on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after she'd withdrawn the divorce papers. I was in the kitchen making pancakes while Emma and Lucas argued over whose turn it was to pick the cartoon they'd watched during breakfast, when Jennifer walked in carrying her laptop and wearing an expression I'd learned to recognize over the past month, the look of someone who'd just discovered something unpleasant. "David, we need to talk about money." Emma looked up from her plate of pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, syrup dripping down her chin. "Are we poor now?" "No, sweetheart," Jennifer said quickly, ruffling Emma's hair. "Daddy and I just need to discuss some boring grown-up stuff. Keep eating your breakfast." But I could see the tension in Jennifer's shoulders, the way she gripped her coffee mug like it was anchoring her to something solid. Over the past 3 weeks, since she'd decided to put the divorce on hold, we'd been having regular conversations about rebuilding our marriage. What we hadn't talked about much were the practical discoveries she'd made during those 2 weeks when she was planning to leave. After the kids finished breakfast and disappeared into the family room to watch cartoons, Jennifer opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet that looked like it had taken hours to create, with columns for rent, utilities, groceries, childcare, school expenses, and dozens of other categories I wouldn't have thought to include. "I've been running numbers," she said without preamble. "Real numbers, not just the fantasy math I was doing when I first talked to my lawyer." I studied the spreadsheet, recognizing the meticulous attention to detail that Jennifer brought to everything she cared about. She'd always been good with budgets and planning, but this level of analysis was something new. "What did you find out?" "I found out that I'm an idiot." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what it costs to maintain the lifestyle Emma and Lucas are used to as a single parent?" I had a pretty good idea, given that I'd been paying for that lifestyle for years, but I could see she needed to work through this herself. "Tell me." "Even with half of our assets and child support, I'd be looking at spending about 60% more than I'd have coming in every month. And that's assuming I could find an apartment in a decent school district for under $3,000, which, spoiler alert, doesn't exist." She scrolled down to another section of the spreadsheet, pointing to numbers highlighted in red. "Private school tuition for both kids, plus after-school care since I'd be working full-time without backup, plus health insurance as a single person instead of family coverage through your firm, plus all the incidental expenses that never seem incidental when you're the only person responsible for them." "What kind of incidental expenses?" "Last week alone, Emma needed new soccer cleats because she'd outgrown her old ones. Lucas had a field trip that required $15 in cash and a signed permission slip I almost forgot about. The dishwasher started making that weird noise again, and I had to take a half-day off work to sit with the repair guy who showed up 3 hours late. Oh, and Emma's friend Madison invited her to another birthday party, this one at that painting pottery place that costs $40 per kid plus the cost of whatever they make. I could see where this was heading, but Jennifer was clearly working through revelations that felt significant to her. "The pottery party was what really got to me," she continued. "Not because $40 is a huge expense, but because as I was calculating whether I could afford it, I realized I was thinking about Emma's social life in terms of cost-benefit analysis. Is maintaining this friendship worth $40 plus transportation time, plus the gift we'd need to buy? And that's when I understood something I'd never thought about before." "What's that?" "You've been shielding me from these decisions for 12 years. Not because you didn't trust me to make them, but because you were handling them so I didn't have to. Every time the dishwasher needed repair or the kids needed something unexpected or there was some expense I thought was just part of normal life, you were running the same mental calculations I've been doing for the past month. Except you were doing it while also managing a law practice and trying to be present for family dinners and bedtime routines." It was gratifying to hear her acknowledge something I'd been doing without really thinking about it, but I could also See how the recognition was affecting her. Jennifer had always been independent, had always prided herself on being capable and self-sufficient. Discovering how much she'd been relying on systems I'd put in place without her full awareness was clearly difficult for her. I never thought about it as shielding you, I said. I thought about it as handling the things I was good at so you could handle the things you were good at. But that's the problem, isn't it? I let myself become good at things that didn't actually matter for our family's stability. I could plan the perfect birthday party or organize the most efficient carpool schedule or coordinate playdates and social events, but I had no idea how much our health insurance cost or what we were spending on utilities or how you managed to keep our checking account balanced despite all the random expenses that come with having kids. She closed the laptop and looked at me directly for the first time since the conversation started. David, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. I've been thinking about this all wrong. When I told you I wanted a divorce, I was angry about feeling invisible in our marriage. I felt like I'd lost myself somewhere between becoming a wife and becoming a mother, and I blamed you for that. But what I've figured out over the past month is that I made myself invisible by refusing to engage with the parts of our partnership that felt too much like work. This was dangerous territory. I could feel the temptation to agree with her, to accept the apology and move forward with the assumption that she'd learned her lesson and we could get back to normal. But I'd learned something over the past month too, and normal wasn't going to be good enough. Jennifer, I appreciate you saying that, but I think we're both responsible for how things got to the point where you felt invisible. How do you figure? Because I did shield you from a lot of decisions and responsibilities, but not necessarily because I thought you couldn't handle them. Sometimes I shielded you because it was easier for me to just handle things myself than to explain the situation and discuss options and come to a joint decision. It was a difficult admission, but an honest one. How many times had I simply paid a bill or scheduled a repair or made a financial decision without consulting Jennifer because I knew she'd agree, and involving her would just slow down the process? You're talking about the dishwasher repair, she said. I'm talking about a lot of things. The dishwasher, the investment account adjustments, the decision to increase our life insurance coverage, the conversations with Emma's teacher about her math scores. I handled those things because I could handle them efficiently. But in doing that, I cut you out of decisions that affected our family. But I never asked to be included in those decisions. Did you know to ask? Did you even know those decisions were being made? She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her thinking through the implications of what I was saying. So, we both contributed to a dynamic where I became disconnected from the practical realities of our life together. That's how I see it. You weren't lazy or irresponsible. I wasn't controlling or dismissive. We just fell into patterns that seemed to work in the short term, but created problems in the long term. The problems being that I started to feel like a passenger in my own life. And I started to feel like I was carrying the weight of all our major decisions alone. It was the first time I'd articulated that feeling, even to myself. During those 2 weeks when Jennifer was planning to leave, I'd been so focused on the logistics of custody and asset division that I hadn't really processed the emotional reality of what her divorce demands had revealed about our marriage. David, can I ask you something that might be uncomfortable? Sure. During those 2 weeks when I was apartment hunting and figuring out budgets and dealing with car repairs on my own, were you relieved at all? Was there a part of you that thought it might be easier to just handle everything yourself instead of trying to rebuild our partnership? The question was perceptive and harder to answer than I'd expected. Honestly, there were moments when I thought about how much simpler some decisions would be if I didn't have to consider anyone else's preferences or coordinate schedules with another adult. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of marriage. But there were a lot more moments when I thought about how much lonelier those decisions would be if I didn't have you to talk them through with, and how much I'd miss having someone who cared about the outcome as much as I did. Even when I wasn't actually participating in making the decisions, even then, because knowing you cared about Emma and Lucas and our life together, even if you weren't involved in every detail of managing it, made the weight of those decisions feel shared instead of solitary. Jennifer opened her laptop again and scrolled to a different section of her spreadsheet. There's something else I figured out while I was doing all this research. What's that? I don't actually want to be a single parent, not because I don't think I could do it, but because I don't want to do it. I want to be part of a partnership where we're both fully engaged in making decisions and handling responsibilities and raising our children together. That sounds like what we had before, just with better communication. No, it's different. What we had before was a division of labor that let us both avoid dealing with things we didn't enjoy or weren't good at. What I'm talking about is a real partnership where we're both involved in everything, even the boring or difficult stuff. That sounds like a lot more work. It is a lot more work, but it's also a lot more honest. And I think it might be a lot more satisfying. She turned the laptop toward me again, this time showing a different spreadsheet. Look at this. This spreadsheet was more complex than the first one, with columns for different scenarios and assumptions. But what caught my attention was that it included my income and expenses alongside hers, creating a comprehensive picture of our family's financial reality. I spent the last week building a real budget for our family, not the fantasy single-parent budget I was working on before, but an actual analysis of how we spend money and where we could make different choices if we wanted to. I studied the numbers, impressed by the level of detail and the insights I could see she'd developed. This is really thorough work. I learned some interesting things. For example, we spend almost $800 a month on restaurants and takeout, mostly because neither of us wants to deal with meal planning and grocery shopping consistently. We could cut that in half if we got organized about cooking at home. And do you want to get organized about cooking at home? I want to try. Not because $800 is breaking our budget, but because I realized that all those nights when we ordered pizza or picked up Thai food, we were missing opportunities to be intentional about family time. She scrolled to another section. We're also spending about $600 a month on various subscription services and memberships that we barely use. I found gym memberships we'd forgotten about, streaming services that overlap with each other, and magazine subscriptions that go straight into the recycling bin. I didn't even know we had magazine subscriptions. Exactly. That's the kind of thing that happens when one person handles all the financial management without input from the other person. You approved subscriptions I signed us up for, and neither of us was keeping track of the overall picture. So what are you proposing? I'm proposing that we completely restructure how we make decisions about money and household management and parenting responsibilities. Instead of defaulting to whoever happens to be more knowledgeable or more available or more willing to deal with something, we make everything a joint conversation. That's going to be time-consuming. It is. But David, do you know what I figured out during those 2 weeks when I was planning to leave? What? I figured out that I don't actually want to make all these decisions by myself. I want to make them with you. But I want to actually participate in making them, not just rubber-stamp decisions you've already worked through. It was a subtle but important distinction. Jennifer wasn't asking to be consulted after I'd done the research and analysis. She was asking to be involved in the research and analysis itself. Can I show you something? I asked. Of course. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, scrolling through weeks of accumulated thoughts and observations. I've been keeping track of things too, not budget stuff, but parenting and household things I noticed when you were pulling back from daily management. What kind of things? Emma has been having trouble with math homework, but she's embarrassed to ask for help because she thinks she should be able to figure it out on her own. Lucas has been having nightmares about monsters under his bed, but he only talks about them when you're putting him to sleep, not when I am. The washing machine is making a noise that suggests the bearings are going bad, which means we'll need to replace it soon, rather than just repair it. I could see Jennifer processing this information, recognizing issues she hadn't been aware of despite being present in the house every day. How did you notice these things when I didn't? Because I was paying attention differently. When you started pulling back to focus on figuring out whether you wanted to leave, I started paying closer attention to everything else. But the thing is, I only noticed these things because I was specifically looking for them. Normally, you would have picked up on Emma's math struggles and Lucas's nightmares because you're more tuned into their emotional needs than I am. And I would have missed the washing machine issue because I don't pay attention to those kinds of mechanical problems. Right. We each notice different things because we're good at different things. But when one of us is distracted or overwhelmed or checked out, important stuff falls through the cracks. Jennifer closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. So what you're saying is that we need each other to be fully present and engaged in order for our family to function well. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I think that's what was missing during the time leading up to your divorce conversation. Not because either of us was failing at our responsibilities, but because we'd gotten into a routine where we were handling things independently instead of working together. David, I have a confession to make. Okay. During those 2 weeks when I was apartment hunting and budget planning and trying to figure out how to manage everything on my own, there were moments when I was absolutely terrified. Not just about the money or the logistics, but about the thought of making all those decisions without you. What kind of decisions? Everything. When Emma asked if she could have a sleepover party for her birthday, I didn't know whether to say yes without thinking about it, or to be more careful about managing expenses. When Lucas wanted to quit soccer because one of the other kids was being mean to him, I didn't know whether that was a reasonable response to a social problem, or whether I should encourage him to stick with it and work through the conflict. Those are hard decisions. They're decisions I never had to make alone before. Even when you were working late or traveling for a case, I knew I could call you and talk through whatever was happening. I knew that if I made a choice you disagreed with, we could discuss it and adjust course. But planning for divorced life meant planning to make all those decisions in isolation. And how did that feel? Lonely and overwhelming, and like I was probably going to mess up a lot of important things because I didn't have access to your perspective. It was a vulnerable admission, and I could see how difficult it was for her to acknowledge the extent to which she'd been relying on our partnership even when she felt disconnected from it. Jennifer, can I tell you what I was thinking during those same 2 weeks? Please. I was thinking about all the ways I was going to miss having your input on the decisions I'd been making alone. Financial decisions, sure, but also parenting. Decisions and social decisions, and even decisions about house maintenance and vacation planning. Really? Really? Do you remember when Lucas broke his arm last year? Of course. Do you remember how we handled it? You drove him to the emergency room while I stayed home with Emma and called the pediatrician to let them know what was happening. Right. And what I was thinking about during those 2 weeks was how I would have handled that situation if you hadn't been there to coordinate with Emma and the pediatrician while I focused on getting Lucas the medical care he needed. You would have figured it out. Maybe. But it would have been more stressful and less efficient, and Emma would have been more scared because there wouldn't have been a calm adult explaining what was happening and making sure she felt safe. I never thought about that incident as an example of us working well together. I just thought about it as normal family crisis management. That's my point. The things we do well as a partnership have become so normal that we stopped noticing them. But during those 2 weeks when I was imagining life without our partnership, I started noticing all the ways we complement each other and make each other's lives easier. Jennifer was quiet for several minutes, staring out the kitchen window, at the backyard where Emma and Lucas had moved their cartoon watching session outside, sprawled on blankets in the sunshine. David, I think I understand now why you agreed to the divorce so quickly. What do you mean? You knew that the only way I was going to appreciate what we had together was to experience what life would be like without it. You were betting that I'd discover I didn't actually want to do everything alone. I was hoping you'd discover that. But I was also prepared for the possibility that you'd discover the opposite. What would you have done if I'd decided that single parenthood was actually what I wanted? I would have supported that decision and figured out how to be the best co-parent I could be, but I would have been heartbroken. Because you'd lose the family life we'd built together? Because I'd lose the partnership with you, the house and the social life and even the daily routines with Emma and Lucas. All of that could be recreated, in different forms. But the partnership we've developed over 12 years, the way we think through problems together and support each other through difficult situations and share the joy of watching our children grow up, that's not replaceable. Even when that partnership wasn't working very well? Even then, because I knew the partnership itself wasn't the problem. The problem was that we'd let ourselves drift into patterns that weren't serving either of us well. Jennifer stood up and walked to the window, watching Emma attempt to teach Lucas how to do a cartwheel on the grass. Can I ask you something else that might be uncomfortable? Always. Are you worried that I'm only staying in this marriage because I discovered I can't afford to leave? Are you concerned that I'm settling for what we have instead of actually wanting to build something better? The question caught me off guard because it hadn't occurred to me to worry about that, but now that she'd raised it, I could see why it would be a concern. Are you staying because you can't afford to leave? No. I'm staying because I figured out that what I thought I wanted, independence and freedom and the ability to make my own decisions, isn't actually incompatible with being married to you. I just have to be willing to participate fully in the marriage instead of expecting it to meet my needs without my active engagement. What does that look like practically? It looks like me being involved in financial planning and household management and major parenting decisions, even when that requires learning about things I've never had to think about before. It looks like you including me in decision-making processes instead of handling things efficiently on your own and then informing me after the fact. That's going to require some significant changes in how we operate as a family. Big changes. But David, I think those changes are going to make both of us happier, not just me. How do you figure? Because you won't be carrying the weight of all our major decisions alone anymore, and I won't be feeling like a passenger in my own life. She turned back from the window and looked at me directly. I want to propose something. I'm listening. I want us to start over, not with our marriage, but with how we structure our partnership. I want to spend the next 6 months learning how to be fully engaged in every aspect of our family's life, and I want you to learn how to include me in that engagement instead of just handling things yourself. What would that look like? Weekly meetings where we review everything that's happening with the kids, the house, our finances, our schedules, our goals. Joint responsibility for meal planning and grocery shopping and household maintenance. Shared involvement in homework, help and bedtime routines and extracurricular activities. That sounds like a lot of meetings and coordination. It does. But it also sounds like a partnership where we're both fully invested, and neither of us feels overwhelmed or disconnected. I thought about her proposal, trying to imagine what our daily routines would look like with that level of shared involvement. It would definitely be more complicated in some ways, but it would also address the underlying issues that had led to her divorce conversation in the first place. Jennifer, I think that sounds like exactly what we need to try. Really? Really. But I have one addition to propose. What's that? I think we should also schedule regular check-ins about how the new arrangement is working. Not just logistics meetings, but conversations about whether we're both feeling valued and heard, and supported in the partnership. Because you don't want us to drift back into patterns that aren't working without noticing it. Exactly. I want us to be intentional about maintaining the kind of marriage that makes both of us want to stay. She smiled, and it was the same real smile I'd seen the night she decided to withdraw the divorce papers. David, can I tell you something I've learned over the past month? Please. I've learned that I don't actually want a different life. I want to be more present in the life we already have. Outside, Emma had successfully taught Lucas to do something that resembled a cartwheel, and their laughter carried through the kitchen window. Jennifer and I stood side by side, watching our children play in the yard we'd chosen together, in front of the house we'd bought together, planning a future we'd build together. It wasn't the same marriage we'd had before her divorce conversation. It was something new, something more intentional and more equitable, and more honest about the work required to maintain a partnership that serves both people well. But it was ours, and for the first time in longer than I cared to admit, that felt like enough. The first test of our new partnership approach came sooner than either Jennifer or I had expected. It was a Thursday evening in early February when Emma came home from school carrying a crumpled paper in her backpack and wearing the expression of a child who knows she's about to deliver news her parents won't want to hear. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something," she announced during dinner, her voice carrying that particular tone 8-year-olds use when they're trying to sound mature about something that's clearly bothering them. "What's going on, sweetheart?" Jennifer asked, setting down her fork and giving Emma her full attention. This was part of our new approach. When one of the kids needed to talk, we both stopped whatever we were doing and listened. "Madison's mom called my teacher today," Emma said, smoothing out the wrinkled paper beside her plate. "And Mrs. Patterson wants to have a meeting with you guys about my math grades." Lucas looked up from his chicken nuggets, which he'd been arranging into what appeared to be a dinosaur formation. "Are you in trouble?" "I don't think so," Emma said, but she didn't sound convinced. Mrs. Patterson said she wants to talk about ways to help me with math homework because I've been struggling with fractions. Jennifer and I exchanged glances across the table. Under our old system, this would have been the kind of situation where one of us would have handled the teacher meeting while the other stayed home with Lucas or dealt with work obligations. Now we'd committed to approaching parenting decisions as a team. Okay, I said, taking the note from Emma and reading through Mrs. Patterson's carefully worded request for a parent conference. When does she want to meet? Tomorrow after school or Monday morning before classes start, Emma replied. She said either time works for her. What do you think would be better? Jennifer asked Emma directly. Do you want to get this conversation over with tomorrow, or would you prefer to have the weekend to think about it first? It was a small thing, but asking Emma for her preference about the timing was something we probably wouldn't have thought to do before. We would have just picked whichever option was more convenient for our adult schedules. Tomorrow, Emma said immediately. I don't want to spend the whole weekend worrying about it. Tomorrow it is, Jennifer said. Dad and I will both come to the meeting, and afterward we can talk about the best ways to help you with math homework. After dinner, while Jennifer helped Lucas with his nightly reading practice, I sat with Emma at the kitchen table and looked through her recent math assignments. What I found was concerning, but not for the reasons I'd expected. Emma, can you show me how you're working through these fraction problems? She picked up her pencil and walked me through her process for adding fractions with different denominators. Her method was technically correct, but it was unnecessarily complicated and time-consuming. More importantly, she was second-guessing herself at every step, erasing and rewriting numbers multiple times even when her first answer was right. How long does it usually take you to finish your math homework? A really long time, she admitted. Sometimes like an hour, and I still don't get all the problems right. An hour of math homework for a third grader seemed excessive, especially when I could see that Emma understood the basic concepts. Something else was going on here. Emma, do you feel comfortable asking for help when you're stuck on a problem? She shrugged, which in 8-year-old language usually means no, but I don't want to admit it. Why not? Because Madison and Sophie always finish their math homework really fast, and they think the problems are easy. I don't want them to know I think it's hard. There it was. Emma wasn't struggling with math concepts. She was struggling with confidence. She was spending an hour on homework that should take 15 minutes because she was afraid to ask for help or admit when she was confused. When Jennifer finished reading with Lucas and joined us at the kitchen table, I explained what I'd discovered about Emma's homework process. So the issue isn't that she can't do the math, Jennifer said, looking through Emma's assignments. The issue is that she's making it much harder than it needs to be because she's worried about what other kids think. That's how I read the situation. Emma, Jennifer said gently, do you know that some things are easier for some people and harder for other people, and that's completely normal? Emma nodded, but she didn't look convinced. What's something that's easy for you but hard for Lucas? Reading, Emma said immediately. I can read chapter books, but Lucas still needs help with picture books. Right. Does that mean Lucas is stupid or bad at learning? No, he's only 5. I'm older, so I've had more practice. Exactly. And does it mean you're better than Lucas, or just that you've had different experiences? Different experiences. Math is the same way, I added. Some kids find it easy right away, and other kids need more practice or different explanations before it clicks. That doesn't say anything about how smart you are or how good you are at learning. But Madison never has to ask for help with anything. Jennifer and I looked at each other, recognizing a teaching moment when we saw one. Emma, Jennifer said, can I tell you a secret about Madison? Emma nodded eagerly. Madison's mom told me that Madison has been working with a math tutor twice a week since the beginning of the school year. So when Madison finishes her homework quickly, it's because she's getting extra help that makes the problems easier for her. Emma's eyes widened. Really? Really? And there's nothing wrong with getting extra help. That's what the tutor is for, and that's what Dad and I are for, and that's what Mrs. Patterson is for. So I'm not stupid for thinking math is hard? You're definitely not stupid, I said firmly. You're smart enough to recognize when you need help, which is actually a really important skill. The next afternoon, Jennifer and I both left work early to attend Emma's parent conference. Mrs. Patterson, a veteran teacher with the kind of calm competence that immediately put nervous parents at ease, had prepared a folder full of Emma's work samples and assessment results. "Emma is a bright, engaged student," she began, which was exactly what every parent hopes to hear at the start of a teacher conference. "Her reading comprehension is above grade level. She's creative in her writing assignments and she works well with other students." "But," Jennifer prompted, because there was clearly a but coming. "But I'm concerned about her approach to math homework. She seems to understand the concepts when we work through problems together in class, but her homework assignments suggest she's struggling with confidence more than comprehension." Mrs. Patterson spread out several of Emma's assignments, pointing to the excessive erasing and rewriting I'd noticed the night before. "See how she's gotten the right answer here, but then changed it to something incorrect? And here, she's used a much more complicated method than necessary, almost like she's trying to prove she understands every possible approach, instead of just using the most efficient one." "We noticed that too," I said. "When we talked to her about it, she mentioned being worried about finishing homework as quickly as some of her classmates. That's what I suspected. Emma is comparing herself to students who may have different learning styles or additional support at home, and she's interpreting normal learning differences as personal failures." Mrs. Patterson pulled out a different folder, this one containing examples of work from other students in the class. Obviously, she'd removed names and other identifying information, but the variety was striking. Some students showed their work in neat, organized steps. Others had messy calculations scratched out and rewritten multiple times. Some used shortcuts and intuitive methods, while others followed textbook procedures exactly. "I show parents these examples because I want you to see that there's no single right way to approach math problems, as long as the student understands the underlying concepts and can explain their thinking." "So, what do you recommend?" Jennifer asked. "I'd like to suggest a multi-pronged approach. First, I think Emma would benefit from some one-on-one math support to rebuild her confidence. That could be tutoring, or it could be structured homework. Help at home where the focus is on celebrating correct thinking rather than correct answers." "What's the difference?" I asked. "If Emma uses the right method but makes a small calculation error, we celebrate the fact that she chose the right approach and help her find the mistake, rather than focusing on the fact that her final answer was wrong. Right now, I think she's so worried about getting wrong answers that she's not trusting her own understanding of the concepts." "That makes sense," Jennifer said. "What else would you recommend?" "I'd also like to have a conversation with the class about different learning styles and the importance of asking for help when you need it. Not specifically about Emma, but as a general discussion about how learning works." Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "But here's what I think is most important for you to understand as Emma's parents. The math struggles she's experiencing right now aren't actually about math. They're about perfectionism and social comparison and fear of being seen as different from her peers." "Meaning?" "Meaning that if we only focus on improving her math skills without addressing the underlying confidence issues, we're likely to see the same patterns show up in other subjects as the work gets more challenging." Jennifer and I spent the drive home from the school discussing Mrs. Patterson's observations and recommendations. What struck both of us was how the teacher had identified issues that went beyond academics to touch on Emma's emotional development and social awareness. "This is exactly what we were talking about," Jennifer said as we pulled into our driveway. "If one of us had gone to this meeting alone, we would have gotten the same information from Mrs. Patterson, but we wouldn't have had the chance to process it together and think through how to address it as a team. And if we'd handled this under our old system, one of us would have been responsible for following up with tutoring or homework help, while the other one might not have fully understood the scope of what Emma was dealing with." "Right. But now we can both be involved in helping her build confidence, and we can both watch for signs of perfectionism or social comparison in other areas of her life." That evening, we sat down with Emma and explained what we'd learned from Mrs. Patterson. We talked about different learning styles, about the importance of asking for help, and about how making mistakes was a normal and valuable part of learning. "So you're not disappointed in me?" Emma asked, snuggled between Jennifer and me on the couch. "We're proud of you for working so hard," Jennifer said, "and we're proud of you for being brave enough to tell us when you were struggling. And we're going to help you figure out ways to make math homework less stressful and more fun," I added. "How?" "Well, we're going to set up a new homework routine where you can ask for help anytime you need it. Without worrying about whether the problem should be easy or hard, Jennifer explained. And we're going to practice celebrating good thinking, even when answers aren't perfect. And, I said, we're going to have Dad take over math homework help, since numbers are one of the things he's especially good at, while Mom helps with reading and writing assignments. It was a small adjustment, but it represented a significant shift in how we approached parenting responsibilities. Instead of whoever was available helping with whatever needed to be done, we were being more intentional about matching our individual strengths to our children's needs. The new homework routine worked well for about 2 weeks. Emma's confidence improved, her math assignments became less stressful, and she started asking for help when she needed it instead of struggling alone. Jennifer and I were feeling pretty pleased with ourselves for implementing our new partnership approach so successfully. Then Lucas came home from preschool with his own academic challenge, and we discovered that good intentions don't always translate to smooth execution. The issue started on a Tuesday when Lucas's teacher, Miss Sarah, sent home a note explaining that the preschool was beginning to assess students' readiness for kindergarten. As part of this process, they were asking parents to practice certain skills at home: letter recognition, number recognition, basic writing, and following multi-step instructions. How hard can it be? Jennifer said that evening, looking over the list of suggested activities. He's already 5. He knows most of his letters and numbers. And he follows instructions fine, I agreed. This should be straightforward. We were both wrong. The first sign of trouble came when Jennifer sat down with Lucas to practice writing his name. What should have been a 10-minute activity turned into a 45-minute struggle involving tears, frustrated scribbling, and Lucas declaring that he hated writing and never wanted to do it again. I don't understand what happened, Jennifer told me later that evening, after Lucas had calmed down and was playing quietly with his dinosaurs. He can spell his name out loud perfectly. He can recognize all the letters when I point to them. But when I ask him to write it himself, he completely falls apart. What does his writing look like? Jennifer showed me Lucas's attempts. The letters were recognizable, but they were wildly different sizes. Some were backward, and the overall effect was messy and inconsistent. His fine motor skills aren't quite there yet, I observed. See how he's gripping the pencil? He's using his whole fist instead of his fingers, which makes it much harder to control. So what do? Let me try working with him tomorrow and see if I can figure out what's going on. The next afternoon, I sat down with Lucas and his practice worksheet. Instead of jumping straight into writing, I spent some time observing how he held the pencil, how he positioned the paper, and what happened to his posture and attention as the task became more challenging. What I discovered was that Lucas had several small issues that were combining to create one big problem. His pencil grip was inefficient, making writing physically tiring. His visual tracking wasn't quite mature enough for him to consistently place letters on the baseline. And his attention span for fine motor tasks was shorter than the time required to complete the assignments. But the most significant issue was that Lucas was trying to write each letter perfectly before moving on to the next one. When a letter didn't look the way he wanted it to, he would erase it and try again, becoming increasingly frustrated with each attempt. Lucas, I said, after watching him erase the same letter 3 times, what do you think would happen if we tried writing your name really fast and messy, just to see what it looks like? It would look bad. Maybe. But it might also be more fun. Want to try? I handed him a new piece of paper and showed him how to write his name quickly, without worrying about perfect letter formation or staying on the lines. The result was definitely messier than his careful attempts, but it was also more relaxed and natural. That was easier, he admitted. Right. And now that you've written it the easy way, we can talk about which letters you want to make neater, instead of trying to make every letter perfect the first time. When Jennifer got home from work that evening, I explained what I'd learned about Lucas's writing challenges and the approach that seemed to work better for him. So he needs to build up his fine motor skills gradually, and he needs permission to make mistakes while he's learning, she summarized. Exactly. And he needs shorter practice sessions more frequently rather than trying to complete whole worksheets at once. That makes sense. But David, I have to admit something. What's that? I was getting frustrated with him yesterday, and I think he picked up on that. I kept thinking he should be able to do this because it seemed so simple. And when he couldn't, I started questioning whether we were doing something wrong as parents. It was an honest admission, and one that highlighted something we were both learning about our new approach to shared parenting. Being more involved in our children's academic and emotional development meant we were also more aware of their struggles, which sometimes triggered our own insecurities about whether we were providing adequate support. I think that's normal, I said. When you're watching your child struggle with something, especially something that seems like it should be easy, it's natural to worry that you're not helping them in the right way. But it's also not fair to Lucas for me to bring my anxiety into his learning process. No, it's not. So how do we handle that? Jennifer thought for a moment. Maybe we need to be more intentional about preparing ourselves before we sit down to help with homework or practice activities, like taking a few minutes to remind ourselves that the goal is supporting their learning process, not achieving perfect results. And maybe we need to be honest with each other when we're feeling frustrated, so we can tag out if necessary, instead of pushing through when we're not in the right headspace. Yes, that sounds like something that would be good for all of us. The conversation about Lucas's writing challenges led to a broader discussion about how our increased involvement in Emma and Lucas's academic life was affecting our own stress levels and expectations. We were both learning that being more hands-on parents meant we were more invested in our children's successes and failures, which could be emotionally intense. Over the following weeks, we developed strategies for managing our own reactions while still being supportive and involved. We started doing brief check-ins before homework time to make sure we were both in a good headspace for helping. We agreed that either of us could call for a break if a learning session was becoming too frustrating for anyone involved. And we made a point of celebrating effort and improvement, rather than just focusing on correct answers or perfect execution. The strategies worked well, but they also revealed something we hadn't anticipated. Our children were more perceptive about our emotional states than we'd realized, and they were adjusting their own behavior based on what they thought we wanted to see. The realization came during a particularly challenging evening when Emma was working on a science project about plant growth. She'd been observing bean seeds for 2 weeks, measuring their progress and recording data in a notebook. The project was going well, but when it came time to create a visual presentation of her findings, Emma became unusually anxious. "What if my poster isn't as good as Madison's?" she asked, staring at her notebook full of careful observations. "What if I measured wrong and my data is stupid?" Jennifer and I exchanged glances, recognizing the pattern of perfectionism that Mrs. Patterson had warned us about. "Emma," Jennifer said gently, "what do you think Mom and Dad care most about with this project? That I do a good job? What does doing a good job mean to you?" Emma thought for a moment. "Getting a good grade and making a poster that looks nice and having the right answers. Those are all fine things to hope for," I said, "but they're not what Mom and I care most about." "What do you care most about?" "We care most about whether you learned something interesting while you were growing your bean plants," Jennifer explained, "and whether you enjoyed the process of observing and measuring and discovering how plants grow." "But what if my poster looks dumb compared to everyone else's?" "Then it looks dumb compared to everyone else's," I said. "And that's okay because your poster is about your bean plants and your observations, not about anyone else's work." "Really? Really? Emma, can I tell you something that might surprise you?" She nodded. "Some of the most important things Dad and I have learned in our lives came from projects that didn't turn out the way we expected them to. The mistakes and unexpected results taught us more than the times when everything went perfectly." "So, you don't care if I get a bad grade?" "We care about whether you're learning and growing and developing confidence in your ability to figure things out," Jennifer said. "Grades are just one way teachers communicate about your progress, but they're not the most important thing." "What is the most important thing?" "That you're curious about the world and brave enough to try new things, even when you're not sure how they'll turn out." That conversation marked a turning point in how we approached academic support for both Emma and Lucas. Instead of focusing primarily on helping them succeed at specific assignments, we started focusing on helping them develop resilience, curiosity, and confidence in their ability to learn from both successes and failures. The shift required us to examine our own attitudes about achievement and perfection. Jennifer and I had both been high achievers in school and in our careers, and we had to consciously resist the urge to project our own competitive instincts onto our children's learning experiences. I keep catching myself wanting Emma's science poster to be the best one in the class, Jennifer admitted one evening as we watched Emma work on her presentation. Not because it matters for her learning, but because I want other parents to think we're doing a good job supporting her academically. I do the same thing with Lucas's writing practice, I said. I find myself wanting his letters to be neater so his teacher will think we're working with him at home. So we're making their learning about our own insecurities as parents. Sometimes, yeah. And that's probably not helpful for anyone. How do we stop doing that? I think we remind ourselves regularly that their learning process is about them, not about us. And maybe we check in with each other when we notice those competitive feelings coming up. The combination of increased involvement in our children's academic lives and more honest communication about our own reactions was changing the dynamics of our family in ways we hadn't anticipated. Emma and Lucas were becoming more willing to share their struggles and ask for help. But they were also becoming more attuned to our emotional responses and more concerned about disappointing us. The challenge of balancing support with pressure came to a head during Lucas's kindergarten readiness assessment at preschool. Miss Sarah had scheduled individual meetings with each family to discuss their child's progress and readiness for the transition to elementary school. Jennifer and I both attended the meeting, curious to hear Miss Sarah's observations about Lucas's development. What we learned was both encouraging and concerning. Lucas is a delightful child, Miss Sarah began. He's creative, empathetic, and curious about the world around him. He gets along well with other children and follows classroom routines without difficulty. That's wonderful to hear, Jennifer said. However, Miss Sarah continued, I have some concerns about his confidence in academic tasks. When we're working on letters or numbers or structured activities, Lucas often asks for reassurance, multiple times before he's willing to try something new. What kind of reassurance? He'll ask questions like, is this right? Or, am I doing it the way you want? Even before he's attempted the task. It's as if he's more focused on getting approval than on exploring and learning. Jennifer and I looked at each other, both recognizing the pattern Miss Sarah was describing. Have you seen this behavior in other children? I asked. I see it sometimes in children whose parents are very involved in their learning and very responsive to their academic needs, Miss Sarah said diplomatically. The children learn that their parents care deeply about their success, and sometimes they interpret that caring as pressure to perform perfectly. So, our increased involvement in Lucas's homework and practice activities might be creating anxiety instead of confidence. It's possible. The goal is to find a balance where children feel supported but not pressured, challenged but not overwhelmed. Miss Sarah pulled out a folder of Lucas's recent work samples, pointing to specific examples of what she'd observed. See how neat and careful his writing is when he thinks an adult is evaluating it? But look at this drawing he made during free choice time. The lines are more relaxed, the creativity is more evident, and you can see his personality in the work. The difference was striking. Lucas's academic work was tidy and correct, but somehow lifeless, while his self-directed artwork was vibrant and expressive. What do you recommend? Jennifer asked. I recommend stepping back slightly from direct academic support and focusing more on fostering his natural curiosity and love of learning. Instead of practicing letters and numbers in structured ways, try incorporating those skills into games and real-world activities where the focus is on fun rather than achievement. Can you give us some examples? Sure. Instead of worksheets, for number recognition, have him help you count ingredients while you're cooking. Instead of formal letter practice, encourage him to write his own stories or make signs for his bedroom door. The goal is to help him see academic skills as tools for doing things he enjoys, rather than as tasks he needs to perform for adult approval. The drive home from Lucas's conference was quiet as Jennifer and I both processed what we'd learned. I think we overcorrected, Jennifer said finally. What do you mean? When we decided to be more involved in the kids' academic lives, we swung too far in the direction of structure and oversight. We went from being hands-off to being hovering. And in trying to be supportive, we accidentally created pressure. Right. So now we need to find a middle ground where we're engaged, but not overwhelming, available but not intrusive. That sounds harder than it should be. It is harder than it should be. But I think it's also normal. We're learning how to be the kind of parents we want to be, and that requires some trial and error. That evening we sat down with both Emma and Lucas to have an honest conversation about how our family's approach to homework and learning was working for everyone. "We want to check in with you guys about something," Jennifer began. "Dad and I have been trying to be more helpful with your schoolwork, but we want to make sure we're helping in ways that feel good to you." "What do you mean?" Emma asked. "Well, sometimes when adults want to help, they can accidentally make things more stressful instead of more fun," I explained. "So we want to know how you've been feeling about homework time and practice activities." Emma thought for a moment. "Sometimes I worry that you'll be disappointed if I get something wrong, even though you tell me it's okay to make mistakes." "That's exactly the kind of thing we want to know about," Jennifer said. "What makes you worry about disappointing us?" "When you both sit with me while I'm doing homework, it feels like it must be really important for me to do well. And when you ask lots of questions about my work, sometimes I think you're checking to make sure I understand everything perfectly." Lucas nodded vigorously. "And when you help me practice writing, you watch me really carefully. And I think you want me to make all the letters perfect." Jennifer and I exchanged glances, recognizing that our children had accurately identified the unintended consequences of our increased involvement. "Thank you for telling us that," I said. "That helps us understand how to be better helpers." "So, what would feel better for you?" Jennifer asked. "How can we help with schoolwork in ways that are more fun and less stressful?" "Maybe you could help when I ask for help, but not sit with me the whole time?" Emma suggested tentatively. "And maybe we could practice writing by making grocery lists or writing letters to grandparents instead of just practicing letters by themselves," Lucas added. "Those are excellent suggestions," Jennifer said. "Anything else?" "Could you tell us when you're proud of us for trying hard, not just when we get the right answers?" Emma asked. "And could you not ask me if my writing is neat enough?" Lucas said. "I already know when it's messy." The conversation was illuminating and somewhat humbling. Our children were articulating insights about learning and motivation that we, as adults, had missed in our enthusiasm to be more supportive parents. "Emma and Lucas, you've both given us really helpful feedback," I said. "We're going to make some changes based on what you've told us, and we want you to keep letting us know how things feel as we adjust." "Okay," Emma said. "But you're not in trouble for helping too much. We know you're trying to be good parents." Out of the mouths of babes, our 8-year-old daughter was reassuring us that she understood our good intentions, even as she provided constructive criticism about our execution. Over the following weeks, Jennifer and I experimented with different ways of being available for academic support without creating pressure or anxiety. We learned to distinguish between the times when our children genuinely needed help and the times when they were seeking reassurance about their performance. We practiced stepping back and allowing them to struggle productively with challenging tasks. And we became more intentional about celebrating effort, creativity, and problem-solving, rather than just correct answers. The process of learning to balance involvement with independence was ongoing, and sometimes frustrating. There were evenings when we provided too much help, and others when we provided too little. There were moments when our own anxiety about their academic progress interfered with our ability to support their learning effectively. But what we gained through this period of adjustment was a deeper understanding of our children's individual learning styles and emotional needs. We learned that Emma thrived with gentle encouragement and space to work through problems independently, while Lucas needed more frequent check-ins and reassurance, but less direct oversight. We discovered that both children were more resilient and capable than we'd given them credit for, and that our role as parents was often more about getting out of their way than about providing constant guidance. Most importantly, we learned that our new approach to shared parenting was working, even when it required us to navigate unexpected challenges and adjust our strategies based on real-world feedback. Jennifer and I were communicating more effectively, making decisions together more consistently, and supporting each other through the inevitable uncertainties of raising children. The academic challenges with Emma and Lucas had tested our new partnership in ways we hadn't anticipated, but they'd also strengthened our confidence in our ability to work together to solve problems and support our family. We were becoming the kind of parents and partners we'd hoped to be, one conversation and one adjustment at a time. The call came at 2:47 on a Wednesday afternoon while I was in the middle of a deposition for a complex commercial litigation case. My phone buzzed with Jennifer's contact information, and normally I would have let it go to voicemail since she knew I had court obligations that day. But something made me glance at the screen, and when I saw she'd called 3 times in the past 10 minutes, I knew something was wrong. "I need to take this," I told opposing counsel and stepped into the hallway. "David, thank God." Jennifer's voice was strained and shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "I'm at the hospital with Emma. You need to get here right now." My heart stopped. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's conscious and talking, but she hit her head really hard during PE class. They're doing a CT scan to check for concussion, and the doctor wants to talk to both of us about the results." I was already walking toward the elevator, my mind racing through the logistics of getting from downtown Austin to Dell Children's Medical Center as quickly as possible. "Which hospital?" "Dell Children's." "Yes. Emergency department." "David, I'm scared." She was unconscious for almost 2 minutes, and she threw up twice in the ambulance. "I'm leaving right now. Should be there in 20 minutes if traffic cooperates. Is Lucas with you?" "No, he's still at preschool. I called Carol and she's picking him up and taking him to her house for the night." "Good thinking. Jennifer, take a deep breath. Emma's going to be okay." Head injuries always seem scarier than they are, and the fact that she's talking and responsive is a very good sign. "I know you're right, but seeing her lying on that gymnasium floor, not moving." Jennifer's voice broke slightly. "David, it happened so fast. 1 minute, she was playing dodgeball with her class, and the next minute, Mrs. Rodriguez was yelling for someone to call 911. I reached my car and started the engine, putting Jennifer on speaker so I could drive while we talked. Tell me exactly what the doctor said when you got to the hospital." "Dr. Martinez said that Emma has a moderate concussion and a small cut on her forehead that needed 3 stitches. They're doing the CT scan to make sure there's no bleeding or swelling in her brain, but he seemed optimistic that it's just a straightforward concussion." "That's exactly what we want to hear. Straightforward concussion, no complications. Has Emma been asking for me?" "She asked where you were when she first woke up, but then she got sleepy again. The nurse said drowsiness is normal with concussions, but they want to monitor her for at least 6 hours to make sure her symptoms don't get worse." 6 hours. Okay. So we're looking at staying overnight probably. That's what I'm thinking. "David, I already called your office and told Mrs. Chen that you had a family emergency. She said she'd reschedule your afternoon appointments and handle anything urgent that comes up." Even in the middle of a crisis, Jennifer was thinking ahead and managing logistics. It was exactly the kind of partnership behavior we'd been working toward, but I hadn't expected to see it tested under these circumstances. "Thank you. That was exactly the right thing to do." I also called Emma's school to let them know what happened and to ask about incident reports or insurance paperwork we might need to fill out. "What did they say?" "Mrs. Patterson is going to email us the incident report, and the school nurse said that their insurance will cover the ambulance costs and emergency room fees. Apparently, this isn't the first time a student has been injured during PE, so they have procedures in place." I navigated through downtown traffic, trying to balance speed with safety, while Jennifer continued updating me on Emma's condition and the medical team's assessment. What struck me was how naturally we were functioning as a team during this emergency, despite the fact that we were physically separated and dealing with a high-stress situation. "Jennifer, how are you holding up? This is scary stuff, even when the prognosis is good." "I'm okay now that I know you're on your way, but David, when I first got the call from the school and had to drive to the hospital by myself, I kept thinking about what it would have been like if we'd gone through with the divorce." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if we'd been divorced and Emma had gotten hurt during my custody time, I would have had to handle this entire situation alone. The ambulance ride, the medical decisions, the communication with doctors, all of it, and you would have found out about it secondhand, maybe hours later. The thought of learning about Emma's injury through a phone call or text message, of not being immediately involved in her medical care, was almost unbearable. During those 2 weeks when Jennifer had been planning to leave, I'd focused mainly on the logistics of custody schedules and weekend visits. I hadn't really considered how medical emergencies or other crises would be handled when we were living separately. "Jennifer, we don't have to think about that scenario because it's not our reality. We're married, we're partners, and we're handling this together." "I know. But it made me realize something important about why I was wrong to think I wanted to handle everything independently. I was pulling into the hospital parking garage, scanning for an available space close to the elevators. What did you realize? I realized that some things are too big and too scary to handle alone, even when you're perfectly capable of handling them. Having a partner doesn't just make difficult situations easier, it makes them bearable. I found a parking spot and gathered my keys and wallet, still talking to Jennifer as I hurried toward the elevator bank. That's a pretty profound insight to have in the middle of a medical emergency. Sometimes it takes a crisis to clarify what really matters. The emergency department at Dell Children's was organized chaos, with medical staff moving efficiently between rooms while families waited in various states of anxiety and exhaustion. I found Jennifer in the pediatric observation area, sitting beside a hospital bed where Emma was sleeping, her forehead bandaged and her face pale but peaceful. "How is she?" I asked quietly, leaning down to kiss Jennifer's forehead before taking her hand. "Better." The CT scan was normal. No bleeding, no swelling, just the concussion. Dr. Martinez said she can go home tomorrow morning if her symptoms continue to improve. And how are her symptoms right now? Mild headache, some nausea, and she's been sleepy. But she's been talking normally when she's awake, and she remembers everything that happened before the accident. I pulled a chair closer to Jennifer's and sat down, both of us watching Emma's steady breathing. The relief of seeing her safe and stable was overwhelming, but it was accompanied by a profound awareness of how quickly life could change, how fragile the normalcy we took for granted really was. "Jennifer, can I ask you something?" "Of course. When you got the call from the school, what was the very first thing you thought?" She was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Honestly, the very first thing I thought was, I need David. Not, I need to get to the hospital, or I need to call 911. My immediate reaction was that I needed you there with me, even though you're perfectly capable of handling a medical emergency. On your own? Even though I'm perfectly capable of handling it on my own, because handling it on my own and wanting to handle it on my own are completely different things." Emma stirred slightly, opening her eyes and looking around the room with the confused expression of someone waking up in an unfamiliar place. "Daddy?" she said when she saw me, her voice small and uncertain. "Hey, sweetheart. I'm right here." I moved closer to the bed and took her hand. "How are you feeling?" "My head hurts, and I feel sick to my stomach." "That's normal with a concussion," Jennifer explained gently. "The doctor said those feelings will go away as you get better." "What happened?" "I remember playing dodgeball, but then everything gets fuzzy." "You hit your head when you fell during PE class," I said. "You have a concussion, which means your brain got shaken up a little bit, but it's going to heal perfectly." "Am I going to be okay?" "You're going to be completely fine," Jennifer assured her. "But you'll need to rest for a few days while your brain heals." "Does that mean no school?" "No school for the rest of this week," I said, "and probably no sports or playground activities for a couple of weeks." Emma's face fell. "But I'm supposed to play in the soccer game on Saturday, and Madison's having her sleepover party on Friday night." Jennifer and I exchanged glances. We'd known that the recovery period for Emma's concussion would involve some disappointments and adjustments, but we hadn't anticipated how difficult it would be to explain activity restrictions to an 8-year-old who felt basically fine. "Emma, I know those things are important to you," Jennifer said. "But right now, the most important thing is making sure your brain heals properly. The soccer game and the sleepover party will happen again, but you only get one brain. But what if my team loses because I'm not there? What if Madison thinks I don't want to be her friend anymore?" The questions revealed the complex social and emotional implications of Emma's injury that went far beyond the medical concerns. She wasn't just worried about missing activities. She was worried about letting people down and losing social connections. "Emma, let's talk to your coach and Madison's mom about what happened," I suggested. "They'll understand that you want to participate, but that you need to follow doctor's orders to get better. Can you explain it to them? I don't want to have to tell everyone about my accident." "Of course we can explain it to them. That's what parents are for." Dr. Martinez returned for his evening rounds, checking Emma's pupils and reflexes, and asking her a series of questions to assess her cognitive function. Emma answered everything correctly. Her speech was clear, and her coordination seemed normal. "I'm very pleased with her progress," Dr. Martinez told Jennifer and me after completing his examination. "The concussion appears to be resolving without complications. We'll discharge her tomorrow morning with instructions for home care and follow-up." "What does home care involve?" Jennifer asked. "Rest is the most important thing. Emma should avoid screens for the first few days, limit physical activity, and get plenty of sleep. Someone should check on her every few hours for the next 48 hours to make sure her symptoms aren't getting worse." "What would we be watching for?" I asked. "Increasing headache, repeated vomiting, unusual drowsiness, confusion, or any changes in her behavior or personality. If you see any of those signs, bring her back immediately." "And how long before she can return to normal activities?" "Assuming her recovery continues as expected, she should be able to return to school next week. Sports and playground activities should wait until she's been symptom-free for at least a week." After Dr. Martinez left, Jennifer and I discussed the logistics of Emma's recovery period. One of us would need to stay home with her for the rest of the week, and we'd both need to be available for the frequent symptom checks the doctor had recommended. "I can work from home tomorrow and Friday," Jennifer offered. "Most of my projects this week are things I can handle remotely." "And I can rearrange my court schedule to be home in the evenings and overnight," I said. "Tom can cover the depositions I have scheduled, and most of my client meetings can be moved to next week." "What about Lucas? He's going to want to see Emma and make sure she's okay. But we also don't want him to be too worried or to feel neglected while we're focused on her recovery." It was exactly the kind of complex family logistics that would have been much more difficult to manage if we were divorced and operating from separate households. Instead of coordinating care between two homes and two schedules, we could provide continuous, consistent support for Emma while also maintaining stability for Lucas. "Let's bring Lucas home tomorrow afternoon so he can see that Emma is okay," I suggested. "But maybe we should prepare him ahead of time for the fact that she'll be tired and might not be up for playing as much as usual." "Good idea. And we should probably explain to him what a concussion is, so he's not scared by Emma's symptoms." "Jennifer, can I say something about how we're handling this situation?" "Sure. 6 months ago, if Emma had been injured like this, we would have managed the crisis, but we would have done it with a lot more stress and probably some arguments about who was responsible for what. Today, even though this has been scary and exhausting, it feels like we're working together instead of just reacting separately to the same problem." I was thinking the same thing. It's like all the work we've been doing to communicate better and make decisions together has created a foundation that's strong enough to handle unexpected stress. And the foundation isn't just helping us, it's helping Emma too. She can see that we're both fully present and focused on her recovery, instead of having to worry about whether she's getting consistent care from both parents. Emma had fallen asleep again during our conversation, her breathing steady and her color improved from when I'd first arrived. Jennifer and I settled in for what we knew would be a long night of hospital chairs and frequent wake-up checks, but there was something comforting about facing it together. Around midnight, when the hospital had quieted and most of the overhead lights had been dimmed, Jennifer and I found ourselves having one of those profound conversations that seem to happen naturally during stressful situations. "David, I need to tell you something that I've been thinking about since Emma's accident." "I'm listening." "When I was sitting in this room by myself waiting for you to get here, I started imagining what it would have been like if we'd gone through with the divorce, and this had happened during my custody time. You mentioned that on the phone. But I didn't tell you the whole thought process. I wasn't just thinking about having to handle the medical decisions alone. I was thinking about how I would have had to call you and tell you that our daughter was injured, and how you would have had to drop everything and rush to a hospital where you might or might not have been welcome, depending on what the divorce papers said about medical decision-making. The scenario she was describing was heartbreaking to consider, but I could see why the events of the day had made her think about it. And then I started thinking about Emma's recovery period. If we were divorced, one of us would have been responsible for her care during the week, and the other would have been relegated to weekend visits or scheduled phone calls. She wouldn't have had both parents available for the frequent check-ins and constant reassurance she's going to need over the next few days. "Jennifer, where are you going with this?" "I'm going with the realization that when I asked for a divorce, I was thinking about what I wanted to escape from. But I wasn't really thinking about what I'd be giving up. I was focused on my own desire for independence and autonomy, but I wasn't considering how that independence would affect Emma and Lucas during the times when they most needed both their parents. It was a mature and thoughtful reflection, and one that highlighted how much Jennifer's perspective had evolved since her initial divorce conversation. Do you think that realization would have been enough to change your mind about wanting a divorce, even if we hadn't worked through all the other issues in our marriage? I don't know. Maybe not, because the problems that led me to ask for a divorce were real problems that needed to be addressed. But I think it would have made me approach the conversation differently. Instead of demanding a divorce, I might have asked for us to go to counseling or to take some time to figure out how to rebuild our partnership. What's the difference? The difference is that asking for a divorce assumes the marriage is fundamentally broken and needs to be ended. Asking for help rebuilding the partnership assumes the marriage has value but needs repair work. And now? How do you see our marriage now? Jennifer was quiet for several minutes, watching Emma sleep and considering her answer carefully. Now I see our marriage as something that's worth the work it takes to maintain it. Not because it's perfect or because we've solved all our problems, but because it provides something valuable for all four of us that we couldn't create separately. What kind of something? Security, continuity, the knowledge that when life gets difficult or scary or overwhelming, there's a built-in support system that doesn't have to be negotiated or scheduled or coordinated with external parties. Is that enough? Is security and continuity enough to make a marriage worthwhile? For me, it is. But David, I also want you to know that it's not just about security and continuity. It's about the fact that I like the person I am when I'm married to you better than the person I was when I was planning to be divorced from you. What do you mean? When I was planning to leave, I was focused on what I thought I needed and what I thought I deserved and what I thought would make me happy. I was thinking like a single person who only had to consider her own wants and needs. And that's bad? It's not bad, but it's not who I want to be. When we're working together as partners, I'm more generous, more patient, more thoughtful about the consequences of my decisions. I'm a better parent and a better person because I have to consider how my choices affect not just me, but all of us. Jennifer, that's a beautiful way to think about marriage, but I want to make sure you're not saying you need to be married to be a good person. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that being married to you, specifically, in the way we're learning to be married now, brings out qualities in me that I value and want to cultivate. Like what? Like the ability to think beyond my immediate desires when I'm making decisions. Like the willingness to have difficult conversations instead of just avoiding conflict. Like the patience to work through problems instead of assuming they're unsolvable. It was a profound statement about personal growth and the ways that healthy relationships can challenge people to become better versions of themselves. And what about you? Jennifer asked. Do you like the person you are when you're married to me? I like the person I'm becoming when I'm married to you in this new way we're figuring out. The old version of our marriage didn't bring out the best in either of us. But this version does. How so? This version requires me to be more communicative, more emotionally present, more willing to share control and decision-making. Those aren't necessarily natural strengths for me, but they're qualities I want to develop. So we're both growing into better versions of ourselves through the work of rebuilding our marriage. That's how I see it. Around 3 in the morning, a nurse came in to check Emma's vital signs and assess her neurological function. Emma woke up confused and slightly disoriented, which the nurse explained was normal for concussion patients during the first 24 hours after injury. "Where am I?" Emma asked, looking around the hospital room with unfocused eyes. "You're in the hospital, sweetheart," I said gently. "You hit your head at school, and the doctors wanted to make sure you're okay." "Are you and Mommy both here?" "We're both here, and we're going to stay with you until you're ready to go home," Jennifer assured her. "I don't remember coming to the hospital." "That's okay," the nurse said kindly. "Sometimes people don't remember things that happened right around the time of a head injury. Your memory should come back as you get better." After the nurse left and Emma had fallen back asleep, Jennifer and I resumed our conversation about marriage and partnership and the ways that crisis situations can clarify priorities and values. "David, I have a confession to make." "Another one?" When Emma was unconscious in the gymnasium and the paramedics were working on her, I had this moment of absolute terror, where I thought about what would happen to our family if something happened to her. That's a normal reaction. Every parent has those thoughts during medical emergencies. But what I realized in that moment was that the family I was terrified of losing wasn't the family I'd been planning to break up 6 months ago. It was the family we've been building together over the past few months, the one where we're both fully present and engaged and working together. Meaning? Meaning that the thought of losing Emma was devastating. But the thought of losing this new version of our family was almost equally devastating. The idea that we might never get to see how good we could be as partners and parents if we kept working at it. So, Emma's accident clarified something about what you value in our marriage? It clarified that what I value isn't just the security and stability of being married. What I value is the specific partnership we've been creating, the way we've learned to support each other and make decisions together and be fully present for our children. And you don't think we could have figured that out without going through the divorce conversation first? I don't know. Maybe we could have. But I think I needed to seriously consider the alternative before I could appreciate what we actually had together. Even though considering the alternative was painful for all of us? Even though it was painful. Sometimes you have to be willing to risk losing something before you can understand its true value. The next morning, Dr. Martinez discharged Emma with detailed instructions for home care and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. Emma was feeling much better, though still tired and occasionally nauseous. The prospect of going home and sleeping in her own bed seemed to lift her spirits considerably. The drive home was quiet, with Emma dozing in the back seat, while Jennifer and I processed the events of the past 24 hours. What had started as a medical emergency had become a profound test of our rebuilt partnership, and we'd passed that test in ways that surprised both of us. Jennifer, I want to say something about how we handled yesterday. What about it? I want to say that I've never been more proud to be married to you than I was watching how you managed Emma's care and coordinated all the logistics while staying calm and focused on what she needed. Thank you. But David, I couldn't have stayed calm and focused if I'd been handling it alone. Knowing you were on your way, knowing we were going to face it together, that's what made it manageable. So we've learned something important about ourselves as partners. What have we learned? We've learned that the work we've been doing to rebuild our marriage isn't just theoretical. It creates real resilience that shows up when we need it most. And we've learned that we're stronger together than either of us is separately, even when we're both capable people who could handle difficult situations independently. When we got home, Carol had left a casserole in the refrigerator and a note explaining that Lucas was having a wonderful time at her house, but was eager to see Emma and make sure she was okay. The simple kindness of having dinner taken care of was exactly the kind of support that makes family crises more manageable. Emma settled onto the couch with her favorite blanket and stuffed animals, content to rest and be pampered for a few days. Jennifer called her office to arrange for remote work, and I rescheduled my court obligations for the remainder of the week. We were operating as a seamless team, anticipating each other's needs and coordinating our responsibilities without discussion or negotiation. That afternoon, when we brought Lucas home to see Emma, his reaction was a mixture of concern and relief. He approached the couch carefully, as if Emma might be fragile, and offered to share his favorite dinosaur to help her feel better. "Does your head still hurt?" he asked, sitting beside her with uncharacteristic gentleness. "A little bit, but it's getting better," Emma assured him. "Are you going to be okay for my birthday party next week?" Emma's eyes widened as she remembered that Lucas's 6th birthday was the following Saturday, and we'd planned a party at the local children's museum. "I don't know," she said, looking to Jennifer and me for guidance. "Will I be better by then?" "We'll have to see how you're feeling," I said. "The most important thing is that you follow the doctor's instructions so your brain can heal properly." "But it's Lucas's birthday. I can't miss his birthday party." "Emma," Jennifer said gently, "Lucas will still have a wonderful birthday party whether you're feeling up to participating fully or not. And if you need to rest or leave early, that's okay too. But I want to be there for him." "And we want you to be there too," I said. "But only if you're feeling well enough. Lucas wants you to get better more than he wants you at his party. Don't you, Lucas?" "I want Emma to get better first," Lucas said solemnly. "The party can wait." It was a sweet moment that highlighted the depth of love and concern our children had for each other. But it also raised questions about how Emma's recovery period would affect family plans and activities over the next few weeks. That evening, after Lucas had gone to bed and Emma was settled for the night, Jennifer and I debriefed about the day and planned for Emma's continued recovery. "I think today went as well as it could have," Jennifer said, curling up beside me on the couch. "Emma seems comfortable, her symptoms are improving, and Lucas isn't too worried. And we managed all the logistics without any major stress or conflict." It makes me wonder why we used to find family crisis management so much more difficult. I think it's because we're actually working together now instead of just dividing up responsibilities and hoping for the best. What's the difference? The difference is that we're both fully informed about what's happening, we're both equally invested in the outcomes, and we're making decisions together instead of separately. So when Emma needed frequent symptom checks throughout the day, we were both watching for the same warning signs instead of one of us being responsible for medical monitoring, while the other handled everything else. Exactly. And when Lucas needed reassurance about Emma's condition, either of us could provide accurate information because we'd both been present for the doctor's explanations. David, I think Emma's accident has shown us something important about the kind of parents we want to be. What's that? I think it's shown us that we want to be the kind of parents who are both fully present and engaged when our children need us, not the kind of parents who divide up responsibilities based on convenience or efficiency. Even when being fully present and engaged is more time-consuming and requires more coordination? Especially then, because the times when our children most need us, during medical emergencies, during emotional crises, during major transitions, those are the times when having both parents fully available and working together makes the biggest difference. Jennifer, can I tell you something I realized today? Always. I realized that the reason I was so calm during Emma's emergency wasn't because I'm particularly good at handling medical crises. It was because I knew you were there managing everything I couldn't manage, which meant I could focus completely on what Emma needed from me. What do you mean? I mean that when I got to the hospital, I didn't have to worry about whether the right medical questions had been asked, or whether the school had been properly notified, or whether Lucas was being cared for. I knew you'd handled all of that, which meant I could put all my attention on supporting Emma and making medical decisions. And for me, knowing you were on your way meant I could focus on being calm and reassuring for Emma, instead of panicking about all the things I might not know how to handle. So we each became better parents because we were functioning as a team. That's exactly right. And David, I think that's what I was missing when I asked for a divorce. I was so focused on what I thought I wanted for myself that I wasn't considering how our partnership made both of us better at the things that mattered most, like raising Emma and Lucas. But also like being the kind of people we want to be. Generous, thoughtful, resilient, capable of handling whatever life throws at us. As we sat together that evening, reflecting on the events of the past day and the insights they'd provided about our marriage and our family, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Not just gratitude that Emma was going to be fine, but gratitude for the crisis that had tested our rebuilt partnership and proven its strength. The divorce papers were still in my desk drawer, unsigned and forgotten. But more importantly, the reasons Jennifer had wanted a divorce in the first place, feeling invisible, disconnected, overwhelmed by life's demands, had been replaced by something better. We'd created a marriage that brought out the best in both of us, that made us stronger individually and as a family, and that could withstand the inevitable challenges and emergencies that life would continue to send our way. Emma's accident had been scary and stressful, but it had also been a gift. The gift of clarity about what really mattered, about what kind of partnership we wanted to build together, and about the family we were becoming through our commitment to growth and change and honest communication. The test had come sooner and more dramatically than we'd expected, but we'd passed it together. 6 months after Emma's accident, I found myself standing in our kitchen on a Sunday morning, watching Jennifer teach Lucas how to flip pancakes while Emma sat at the breakfast table working on a puzzle that had been challenging her for weeks. The scene was ordinary in every way, yet it represented something extraordinary. A family that had learned to choose each other deliberately rather than simply defaulting to habit. The divorce papers had finally been removed from my desk drawer, The week before, not destroyed but filed away in our important documents folder. Jennifer had suggested we keep them as a reminder of how close we'd come to making a decision that would have changed all our lives, and how much work it had taken to build something better instead. "Dad, can you help me with this corner piece?" Emma called out, holding up a puzzle piece that looked identical to 12 others scattered across the table. Her concussion had healed completely, leaving no lasting effects except perhaps a slightly more cautious approach to playground activities, and a deeper appreciation for how quickly life could change. "Sure, sweetheart," I said, settling beside her to examine the puzzle. "Sometimes the pieces that look wrong are actually exactly right. You just have to be patient enough to try them in different positions." "Like you and Mom did with your marriage?" Emma asked with the startling perceptiveness that 8-year-olds sometimes display. Jennifer looked up from the stove where she was supervising Lucas's pancake flipping technique, catching my eye with a smile that acknowledged how much our children had observed and understood about our journey over the past year. "Something like that," I said. "Sometimes adults have to figure out new ways to fit together, too." "But you didn't get divorced like Madison's parents did." "No, we didn't get divorced. We decided to learn how to be married in a better way instead." "What's the difference?" Jennifer turned off the burner and joined us at the table, Lucas proudly carrying a plate of slightly lopsided but perfectly edible pancakes. "The difference," Jennifer said, "is that when something isn't working well, you can either throw it away and start over with something completely different, or you can figure out how to fix what's broken and make it better than it was before." "And you chose to make it better?" "We chose to make it better," I confirmed. "And it turned out to be more work than starting over would have been, but also more rewarding." Lucas climbed into his chair and began arranging his pancakes into what appeared to be a dinosaur formation. "I'm glad you didn't get divorced," he announced matter-of-factly. "Madison says her mom cries a lot now, and she has to pack a backpack every time she wants to see her dad." The innocent observation was a stark reminder of the path we'd chosen not to take, and the complications we'd avoided by doing the harder work of rebuilding rather than separating. After breakfast, while the kids played in the backyard, Jennifer and I found ourselves in the same conversation we'd been having regularly for months, checking in about how our new approach to marriage was working and what adjustments we might need to make. "How are you feeling about everything?" I asked, a question that had become our standard opening for these discussions. "Honestly, I'm feeling grateful," Jennifer said. "Not just grateful that we stayed together, but grateful that we went through the process of almost separating. I don't think we would have built what we have now without going through that crisis first." "What do you think we have now that we didn't have before?" "Intentionality. Before, our marriage was something that existed by default. We were married because we'd gotten married and had children and built a life together. Now our marriage exists because we choose it every day. And that feels different. It feels like the difference between drifting and sailing. Same ocean, same boat, but completely different relationship to the journey." Through the kitchen window, we could see Emma and Lucas collaborating on an elaborate fort constructed from lawn chairs and blankets. Emma was clearly the architect, directing Lucas on placement and structure, while Lucas contributed creative touches like dinosaur, guards, and secret entrances. "They're good at working together," Jennifer observed. "They are. And I think part of that is because they've seen us learning to work together better." "Do you think they remember how things were before, when we were more disconnected and stressed about family logistics?" "I think they remember the feeling more than the specifics. Emma mentioned the other day that our house feels more peaceful now, and Lucas told his teacher that his parents talk to each other more. Smart kids with parents who finally figured out how to be smart about marriage." Jennifer laughed. "I'm not sure we've figured it out completely, but we've definitely figured out how to keep working on it instead of giving up when things get difficult." "Speaking of working on it, I have something I want to propose." "I'm listening." "I want us to plan a trip together. Just the two of us, for our 15th wedding anniversary next year. Not because we need to get away from the kids or because our marriage needs rescuing, but because I want to celebrate what we've built." "Where were you thinking?" "Italy, Florence. All those art museums and beautiful architecture you used to dream about seeing." Jennifer's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. You remembered that I wanted to go to Florence. I remembered that you had dreams beyond being Mrs. David Miller and Lucas and Emma's mom. And I want to celebrate those dreams as part of celebrating our marriage. David, can I tell you something I've realized about those dreams? Always. I used to think that wanting to see the world and experience art and have adventures meant I wasn't satisfied with domestic life. But what I've learned is that having a strong partnership actually makes it easier to pursue individual interests and dreams. How so? Because when you know you have a solid foundation at home, when you trust that your partner is fully invested in maintaining that foundation, it's safer to take risks and try new things. I can think about traveling to Florence or taking an art class or changing careers, because I know we're building something together that can accommodate individual growth. So independence and partnership aren't opposites. They're not opposites. They're complementary. The stronger our partnership becomes, the more freedom we each have to be fully ourselves within it. Later that afternoon, we had lunch at the park, where Emma and Lucas spent an hour on the playground equipment with the fearless energy of children who had learned that setbacks were temporary, and that their parents could handle whatever challenges arose. "Mom, Dad, watch this," Emma called out from the top of the climbing structure, preparing to attempt the monkey bars that had intimidated her before her accident. "We're watching," Jennifer called back, both of us ready to offer encouragement, regardless of whether Emma made it across successfully. Emma made it halfway across before her grip slipped, and she dropped safely to the sand below. Instead of being discouraged, she brushed off her hands and immediately climbed back up to try again. "That's my girl," I said quietly to Jennifer. "Resilient and determined." "She gets that from both of us," Jennifer replied. "The determination and the resilience. And the willingness to try again when something doesn't work the first time." On Emma's third attempt, she made it all the way across the monkey bars, pumping her fist in triumph while Lucas cheered enthusiastically from the swings. "I did it! Did you see? I made it all the way across." "We saw," Jennifer said, giving Emma a hug when she ran over to us. "We're proud of you for keeping trying." "And we're proud of you for not giving up when it was hard," I added. As we drove home that evening, with both kids tired and content in the back seat, Jennifer and I reflected on how much had changed since that November evening, when she'd first mentioned wanting a divorce. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't agreed to my demands so quickly?" Jennifer asked. "I wonder sometimes. But I think we would have ended up in the same place eventually, just with a lot more arguing and legal fees." "Why do you think that?" "Because the underlying issues would have been the same whether we fought about them during a divorce proceeding or worked through them while staying married. You needed to feel valued and heard in our partnership, and I needed to learn how to include you in decision-making instead of just handling everything myself. So the divorce conversation was really about those underlying issues, not about actually wanting to end the marriage." That's how I see it now. The divorce was the dramatic solution to problems that had more practical solutions. And the dramatic solution got our attention in a way that gradual dissatisfaction might not have. Exactly. Sometimes you have to almost lose something before you understand how much you value it. That night, after Emma and Lucas were asleep and the house had settled into its evening quiet, Jennifer and I sat on our back porch, watching stars appear in the clear Texas sky. "David, I want to thank you for something." "What's that?" "Thank you for loving me enough to let me figure out what I really wanted instead of trying to convince me to want what we already had. Thank you for wanting to figure it out together instead of just walking away when things got complicated." "Do you think we'll make it? Long term, I mean? Do you think what we've built is strong enough to last?" "I think what we've built is strong enough to be worth fighting for when it needs fighting for, and worth rebuilding when it needs rebuilding. And I think that's probably the best foundation any marriage can have." "I love you, David Miller." "I love you too, Jennifer Miller. And I love the life we've chosen to build together." The stars were fully visible now, scattered across the sky like puzzle pieces that had found their perfect positions after years of patient searching. Inside the house, our children slept safely in their beds, dreaming whatever dreams come, to kids who know they're loved and secure. And on the porch, two people who had almost given up on each other sat planning a future that felt both stable and full of possibility. The divorce papers were filed away, but more importantly, The reasons for considering divorce had been replaced by something better. We'd learned that good marriages aren't accidents. They're achievements, built through daily choices and honest conversations and the willingness to keep growing together even when growth is uncomfortable. Sometimes the best way to save something precious is to be willing to let it go. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is give someone exactly what they think they want, so they can discover what they actually need. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.